identifying a want. Yeah, what about a need?
I was trying to come up with a story that would capture the essence of this phenomenon, and the Silicon Valley at the end of the 20th century was undoubtedly a phenomenon. There was an incredible amount of money, an incredible amount of excitement, and yet my personal experience was that it was really unsatisfying and that the people living within it were really lost.
It was a great script, and there was a lot of emotional range for the characters and for the camera. And so that excited me because it was a chance to work on something that I believed in.
One of the reasons I worked on the film is that I thought it had some important things to say.
You advertise alcohol to alcoholics.
Exactly.
I think what want means to me is desire. It is something that you can never have.
It draws a pretty important parallel between our personal experience and our experience as a culture.
I'm telling you, there's nothing to boost a man's spirits like dropping 50 grand on a new set of wheels. Don't tell me you can't afford it. In all this talk about the connecting people together with the internet, what was missing was the individual, and the individuals were being left behind.
The power of the web is about communicating with each other. I want to do something that brings people together. We're getting more and more isolated.
I feel like this story is an important story to tell. I wouldn't have stuck with it, I think, if I didn't feel like it had a really strong point.
Have I got you going yet?
Initially, Michael came to me and had expressed some interest in making Want look a little bit different than kind of the standard DV features that were out there. We had a very limited budget and a very limited time and resources. We weren't going to be able to go out and get every trick in the book, but Michael wanted it to look like we had every trick in the book. He wanted the range from high-end commercials and feature films all the way down to the rattiest, most dirty-looking security camera. All of these little cameras were used in different ways. Each one of them has their own little story. This one that I'm holding here was used in the rest stop sequence by Barry himself, and he actually shot himself in the car during the blowjob. And it created this very over-the-top and kind of dark and dingy kind of scene that could only be created by something that was this close to the actor's face, that was being held by him, that was kind of breaking up, and I think that was a successful use of these different cameras.
In order to capture Trey's journey from this isolated person surrounded by all these ads into this place where he becomes almost inside the ads himself, and the whole world becomes distorted like he's part of this advertisement. In order to accomplish that, we built this spectrum where each scene was sort of measured in a glamland versus underworld. And when we were in the underworld, it was his interpersonal space. And when we were in the glamland, he was surrounded by luxury and by the seduction of the world around him. As the film progresses, he moves from being isolated in his underworld into this place where he is inside the advertisement and he can't get out of it. And it's almost like this collision of desire and marketing, where they just, instead of merging like the marketers would like you to think, they collide in this sort of brutal, ugly way.
Digital video has great detail in the blacks. It looks great at night. The sensitivity of the cameras these days allows for natural light shooting that you just didn't have access to not many years ago. Want is a very dark story. It takes place in those blacks. It takes place in those shadows, the shadows of the human soul and the depth at which we can reach. And therefore, to realize this picture with this technology at this age sort of ties back into itself in an interesting way.
We worked out a number of transitions between shots, and actually were able to execute them in the real world with actors, with equipment. So we were able to get our vision, and a lot of it is in the film, in a bunch of the transition shots. Michael and I were talking about the scene where he identifies his father's body at the morgue, and Michael said, I want to sort of back away from him and lose him in a void somehow. And we were trying to figure out how to do that without a lot of heavy equipment and so forth. And the way we wound up setting it up was I sat on top of one of those sort of 4-foot tall TV stands that you push around. And I leaned over the edge of the stand. I held the camera in my hand, sort of basket-like in front of me, and framed up Gene's face. Then I tilted up towards Trey. And as I tilted up to Trey's face, the driver of the TV stand rolled me down the hallway, while at the same time, somebody else rolled the gurney with Gene off to one side. So the effect is that Trey is, he just disappears from us in a way. He gets lost and then splits into the two trays to be reintegrated later after he sort of gets something when his father dies.
I had the idea for Mom's house because Mom is this character who lives for her TV. And so I figured we could take it a step further and have Mom live on TV. And so I brought in a 3-tube 1980s circa Ikegami tube camera and set it up and lit it. I lit it as flat as you possibly could get away with like 6,000 watts of flat, open-face lighting, about the ugliest lighting I could come up with. And we shot it with very rigid, very static shots and cut it like a TV sitcom of that era. I think we were successful. It comes off like Mom is in this TV land. It's a very dramatic, very different look. And to the point where we even added applause when Trey shows up. And Peter Cavallero and Amy Sipos, our production team, came in and dressed that house to look as kitschy as we could.
I kept telling Michael that I felt like this was a really ambitious project because as we were going through the post side of the project, we realized that we had over 100 special effects throughout the film, some being just minor compositing jobs, all the way up to these major 3D billboards.
In the places where we weren't able to actually put the brands into the shots at the time when we were shooting, we tried to do it digitally. We had more than 25 effects artists working on the film, doing various shots, compositing the cars, all the computer screens, speed effects, and all the branding elements that became the part of the film that I'm most proud of.
We give the artists the files and they would go home and they would do it, but because of the fact that each effects artist was working in their own way and working on their own time and at home, we get all this effects stuff back that wasn't consistent. And there would be scenes that would be side by side. And I think that in general, that's the problem when you're doing an independent film, you don't have a controlled environment where you can have someone standing over their shoulder going, okay, we've got, you've got to go and you've got to do this, or having them work side by side so they can see what each other is doing.
Filmmaking has changed forever. Not just DV technology, but the fact that the tools are becoming more affordable, easier to use, more accessible to a broader range of people is going to change the stories that are told. It all sort of comes around full circle to come back to what is storytelling. And I think storytelling is inherently a personal thing. I think that storytelling is the way that we communicate our view of the world. And this technology is going to make that possible for a much broader range of people to tell their stories. In that regard, I'm proud to be involved in designing the tools, and I'm also glad to be a pioneer in terms of showing what you can do with this technology.
On a personal level, Trey is deluded in a way in his alienation that this spiral of technology and profit and materialism is gonna lift him up somehow, and that things will be okay if he just has, that Cygnus SUV, or this woman. But he's apart from himself in a way that's really damaging to him.
All of the people who were in those software companies at that time, when this dot-com bubble was brewing, were not millionaires. They had dreams of making all this money. They had their stock option package, and they would look online and watch their stocks go up and up and up. But they weren't really getting rich. They were really just sort of working 18, 20-hour days, sleeping under their desk, and being lonely. In looking for a story, I wanted to find something that would not just pull back the cover on what was going on in this world, but also find a message that would sort of reflect to any time. And to say, look at the excesses of this time, not just as a time capsule of Silicon Valley, but as this is what happens when capitalism gets out of control.
Think of the things that you see that you want. A new house or an SUV and a hot tub. How about a few fine young vixens help you get wet?
And I think that that's sort of what's going on in our culture at large too, is that, you know, we put a lot of faith in these things. We put a lot of faith in the marketplace and a lot of faith in technology, and we're starting to lose faith and contact in ourselves and with other people. And, you know, we can make all the cool tools we want to, but if we've lost that, we're really in trouble.
The story really talks about the way that these young men in their cubicles turn to this internet sex thing as an outlet. The environment inside these dot-com startups often had a feeling like a fraternity or like a college dorm. And on the one side, that was really fun because people brought their dogs to work and they skateboarded around the office. And then on the other hand, it also had that sort of desperation, that sexual desperation of these, you know, young 20-something guys all wishing that they could be getting laid and instead spending all their time looking at their computer. You know, internet pornography really came of age in the late 90s. It was almost like that the pornography was the only part of the community of the internet that was really working as a community.
Here we go.
You know, as a filmmaker, you are speaking to an audience, and you need to be responsible for what you're saying.
It's for real.
That's fucked up. Oh, shit, get that shit off my computer, man.
So it's really important to question yourself while you're in the process of filmmaking and to be responsible, but also not be afraid to say what it is you have to say, you know, and not be afraid to explore things that might make people uncomfortable.
We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about sex addiction. We don't like to talk about the fact that there are staggering statistics of people who spend, you know, just hours and hours and hours looking at internet pornography and, you know, and all the other ways that it manifests. And I think that addiction in general is a symptom of, you know, that emptiness. The God-shaped hole, that hole you can't fill, right? The only God is going to fill that hole, and yet we try and fill it with everything we can, with too much food, with sex, with buying things, you know, and that is, to me, the heart of the theme of the film, is trying to fill that God-shaped hole. Trey's story is, in a sense, our society's story, and we are pining for this beautiful technological nirvana, and really we're just sitting on the dirt looking up at the moon.